This new series of chapter books features the adventures of Trim the cat and his friends. The series is based on a real cat named Trim, who was born in 1799 and traveled aboard the HMS Investigator with British Explorer Mathew Flinders. The books are a fun way to help inspire a child's curiosity about the world and to learn about being part of a community. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner. Welcome to the Kids Bookshelf. Ahead, we'll explore the first two books in this series about Trim the cat and talk with the author and illustrator about the inspirations behind them. I requested and was provided with a copy of the books we'll discuss, but this video is not sponsored. Deborah Hopkinson is an award-winning author of more than 70 books for children and teens, including Carter Reads the Newspaper and Thanks to Frances Perkins. Kristy Caldwell is an award-winning illustrator of many children's books, as well as being an educator. They join us to talk about Trim Sets Sall and Trim Helps Out. Deborah and Kristy, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Deborah, I understand that this series of early chapter books is inspired by the true stories of a famous ship's cat. How did you become aware of Trim the cat, and how did that lead to the writing of these books?
Well, I love to put animals in my books, and I am always looking around for things in history. And I don't remember exactly how I found out, but I heard that Mathew Flinders, a British explorer who lived from 1774 to 1814 and was the first person to the first Western expedition around Australia, had a famous ship's cat. And there are statues of Flinders and Trim in Australia and England. And I have had cats my whole life. And I thought this would be a great story. And I tried it as a picture book. It didn't work. And then this seemed like the most fun way to do it. And there aren't that many historical fiction books at this early reader level. And luckily, our editor at Peachtree roped Kristy into this project. She and I had worked on another book together, and she combines both. I think her art just makes it both classic and modern, but also the research is there too. So they look to me so fresh and inviting. I'm excited to share them with kids.
That's so kind. Thank you.
And we'll talk about those illustrations in just a moment. Now, you described this as an early reader chapter book. So for what ages would you recommend this series?
Well, technically, the book lists 7 to 10, but I have a 7-year-old grandson, and when he was about 4, these are the kinds of books that I would read to him. So I really encourage lots of reading aloud throughout preschool and elementary and even later. It's good to read books with your kids. So I think that Oliver, who's now 7, can read these by himself. And he probably could have done that last year. So I think that it's that preschool, early elementary range.
You know, it depends, of course, on the child and how advanced they are in their reading skills, but adults may be reading this book along with the children. So do you keep both of those audiences in mind as you write your books?
Yes, I do try, because I know that as someone who reads aloud a lot, especially recently to a young reader in my life, I'm always looking for books that make me laugh or that might that have also emotional resonance, so that when you feel as though you're really part of the story. And for me, one of the messages in this book is that Mathew Flinders wrote his tribute to his cat, which is amazingly modern sounding, although he wrote it in 1809, but it wasn't discovered in his papers until 1971. And so really the message, especially in the note to readers, is to tell your own story.
I'm talking with Deborah Hopkinson and Kristy Caldwell about a new chapter book series featuring Trim, the ship's cat. And in a moment, I'll talk with Kristy about the challenge of illustrating the series. But first, I'm going to read a portion of the book to give you a taste of the series. Trim Sets Sall, Chapter 1, The Ready-to-Go Kitten. Some cats are happy curling up at home. Others look for adventure. This is the story of a kitten who was always ready to go. It all began the day he chased a bee. The kitten ran this way, he ran that way, he raced up a hill. Then the kitten tumbled down the hill. He landed plop, right on top of a dog. "I'm too tired to play," the dog said. "Why are you tired?" the kitten asked. "I'm a ship's dog," she said, "and I've been busy helping the crew get ready." "Ready for what?" the kitten asked. "Ready to sail the world and learn new things," the dog told him. "I want to do that," the kitten cried. "Can I be a ship's dog too?" "That's silly. You're not a dog," she said. "Captain Flinders is looking for a ship's cat, though," the dog said. "Here he comes." "Why, Penny, it looks like you found our new ship's cat," the captain cried. "Are you ready for an adventure, little one?" "Meow, meow," the kitten said. "That sounds like a yes," the captain said. "Let's call you Trim." Trim clambered up to the captain's shoulder, right where he belonged. Then they all rowed off to a big ship in the bay. Kristy, these books are about a cat who lives on a ship during a specific time in history. Now, to make sure those illustrations you create are historically accurate, what research challenge did that pose for you?
I did so much research. I feel like the bulk of the research I did was on the ship because that's the entire environment, at least for these first few books. And it's also a very specific ship. It was, I'm going to get this wrong, but at the time that I was researching it, it was a frigate converted from something else. People were recommending that I go watch movies like Master and Commander. I was taking screenshots. I was emailing people who work at museums in Australia that had scale models of the original ship, asking if they had additional photos from what were on the website. It's sometimes you get lucky with your research for a book because there's a lot out there. There are photographs out there, and sometimes you have to dig a little deeper. So I was ordering also a lot of books that kind of break down the interior of the ship and how the levels, stack up, how the storage is set up in the hold. I was trying to figure out particularly the character journeys and how those would work in the book. So, Trim the cat, he has very specific paths that he takes through the book to get from one scene to another. And I needed to make sure that those weren't too complicated and that they make sense. Also accounting for the fact that this is a children's book. And so a lot of these ships were converted from ships that were used for warfare, and you don't want, any residual signs of that on the ship. But also, Deborah and I were both researching the crew and the purpose of the ship. There were a lot of artists and scientists on the ship because part of what they were doing was researching local, flora. They had botanical illustrators on the ship. And so we found out that they actually even kept a greenhouse on the ship. So there were really fun, specific details that got written into the story from the research that we were doing in the background.
So let's talk about the stories in these first two books of this series. We've got Trim Sets Out and Trim Helps Out. Deborah, tell us about what readers are going to find here.
Trim, the real Trim was born in 1799 on one of Mathew Flinders' ships. These stories, as Kristy was saying, take place on the HMS Investigator, which is the ship that was the expedition that went around Australia between 1801 and 1803. And I needed to get Trim onto the ship and without making it too scary for young readers. So it's not like he's an abandoned cat. He just shows up one day and lands on top of Penny, who's the ship's dog. And they row out the ship is in the harbor and they row out to the bay. And we wanted to give young readers the basics of what a ship is like. And it's funny, I don't think about this now, but a friend of mine who read this said that her granddaughter likes to play at being on a ship, and she had forgotten the names of a ship. So one of the first things we do is Trim gets a tour. So the bow, which rhymes with bow wow, and the stern and port and starboard. So some of that is built in. And then we also, as Kristy mentioned, we chose one character and made him younger than a real crew member would have been. But William Westall was a landscape artist who was 19 when he went on this expedition. And so he becomes Will the artist. So there's one child character, and the rest of the adults, we mostly see them in the distance. And Captain Flinders, we mostly see him from the shoulders down, from sort of a cat's eye view. And the books really are about Trim learning the ropes, as it were, and getting along with the crew. And one of the fun things about each book, there's an author's note. And one of the things that we put in book one is that Trim falls overboard. And Mathew Flinders tells us that really happened to Trim. He was chasing along the deck and went overboard. And they threw him a rope. He swam, and he grabbed it like a man and climbed up it like a cat. So we put that note so that we're trying to actually explain to children the difference between nonfiction and historical fiction. So it was really fun to use some of that. And in book two, which is Trim helps out, we make use of the nature collection. So some of the theme is to explore the world, to find out new things.
And I understand that you hope to make this an ongoing series and that you have 2 more books already in the works.
We would love to. There are 2 books coming out in 2024. So Trim Saves the Day comes out in March, and that is about Trim finding a leak in a water cask. So again, fresh water being something that was important on sea voyages. And then Trim Sails the Storm will come out in July. And there we meet a new friend who's based on a real albatross named Wisdom, who is the oldest wild banded bird in the world, a different kind of albatross. But again, that idea of introducing a little bit of tension and conflict, but keeping it safe for the youngest readers. Not too scary.
Kristy, how would you describe your illustration style?
It's a good question. I have a bit of a restless brain, so I think from project to project, my style varies a little bit. Maybe more than a little bit. But particularly with these books, they're so warm and they're so fun and they're so intimate. More and more I've been wanting to bring back more painting into my work. My undergraduate degree was studio art. It was basically oil painting. And I think as an illustrator, you're always kind of inspired by / limited by the resources that you have immediately available. I have a very nice scanner now, which allows me to do more painting in my studio and then scan it and put everything together digitally and clean it up. So I think my Illustrator, it's like a controlled chaos, maybe. There's, I'm using acrylic wash, I'm using watercolor, colored pencils, I'm grunting, I'm pacing around, I'm using a lot of ink. It's very messy. In the end, I think the chaos, I remove some of the chaos once it's finished, but the process of getting there, I actually, you won't be able to see this in the audio version, but I have around the studio some of the sketches that I worked on in the beginning for the animals. So there's definitely a lot of process to get to the point where I have a process for myself that I know I can rely on. I actually feel like the 4th book, I'm actually working on the cover for the 4th book this week, and I just finished the interior art for the 4th book this week. And I feel like it took me 4 books to feel really, really happy with where the illustrations are at. You spend time with these characters and you spend time in the world, and you're kind of responding to what's there, what Deborah's brought to the characters' voices in your head. And it can take a long time to get there and to kind of meet them where they are. But I feel like that's kind of my process more than anything, is a responsive process where instead of trying to force a very specific style that feels like me onto every project, I take time to kind of listen to what the project seems to want and try to meet it halfway.
Deborah, I imagine that there's a similar thing going on with you as the author, in that the more you write about this cat and his companions, the better you know those characters, so it helps you develop more stories going forward.
Yes, and also what's important to me, I think, as someone who reads aloud, is, and there are some beautiful models, readers, listeners, and viewers might know Cynthia Ryland's Mr. Putter and Tabby books, or the Henry and Mudge books, where in a very short space, there is a book that the characters are there, there's a story, but there's this emotional resonance where it kind of brings it so that it, I can't really even describe it, but you close the book and you feel like, oh, that's exactly the way it should have happened. And one of the beautiful things, I think, about Kristy's work here is that the stories always end in the evening, as all the characters are on the ship, on the bow. And what I wanted to convey, I think, even though it's about talking animals, is also the fact that, we do love our pets. And this man who lived 200 years ago cared about this cat enough to, when he was in prison, actually, in a French prison, is start to write this story about him, this tribute that is so warm and funny and amazingly modern, and to try to capture what we feel about our kids, our cats, just that love and compassion. And part of it also is thinking that preschoolers and young, elementary students, they're becoming part of communities, and the ship is really a community. So that's, I think, part of what Kristy's work definitely shows. You get that sense of warmth among, and although, we think of explorers in one way, Mathew Flinders apparently had quite a reputation for being sort of remarkably open-minded and warm. He didn't name anything after himself. He played the flute, and he and his wife had one daughter, and then her son ended up becoming an archaeologist, so an explorer too. So if you're going to choose someone to write about from the past, Mathew Flinders is a good one.
The first two installments in this new chapter book series are Trim Sets Sall and Trim Helps Out, written by Deborah Hopkinson and illustrated by Kristy Caldwell. Deborah and Kristy, thank you very much for talking with me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
If you'd like to get copies of Trim Sets Sall and Trim Helps Out, I've placed a link in the description below. Thank you for watching this edition of the Kids Bookshelf. And if you'd like to see more videos about children's books and their authors, be sure to like, subscribe, and click on the bell to be notified about future programs. I'm Dan Skinner. Until next time, keep sharing the gift of reading.